Welcome back to another Fuel Up Classic video. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do, because if you love classic cars of all varieties, then this is the channel for you. And today, it's one of my absolute favorites. It's the BMW E30 325, a car that currently is probably one of the hottest properties on the classic car market. These are so desirable right now. I've owned one in the past. I've got my hands on this beautiful example to show you exactly why it's just so desirable. And also, if you're thinking about buying one, a few things to look out for as well. But join me as we take this one out for a drive on some of my favorite country roads, and I'll talk you through what it's like to be behind the wheel of an E30 BMW. For me, this is a little bit of a trip down memory lane because about 5 years ago, I owned an E30 Touring, and I don't usually get nostalgic about cars, but it's one of the very, very few of the many cars I've owned that I regret selling. I really loved that car. It was nothing special. It was just a 4-cylinder 318 Touring, but I had such fun with it, and it still just has great memories. So it's really nice to be back behind the wheel of an E30. This one is the 325 as well. It's the 6-cylinder. It's actually the one you want. It's so well suited to this car. It's silky smooth, plenty of power, automatic gearbox on this one, but really quite refined. And these cars, although they're not out and out sports cars, they do make fantastic cruisers. And of course they look great. They are an 80s icon, and the demand for these has gone through the roof. I sold my E30 Touring 5 years ago for a few £1,000s, and to be perfectly honest, I thought I'd done well. This very car that I'm now sat in, being a 325 Cabrio with sensible mileage, just over 100,000 miles, in really nice condition, has just sold for £15,000. Prices of these are just going up and up and up. And what I really like about them as well, and I think we've got a big problem in the classic car industry of attracting newer, younger people into the industry, getting into the enjoyment of these cars. And the E30 is a great place to start. Anyone that's in their sort of 30s, mid-30s and above will love these cars. They'll remember them from their youth. They're still special, and they're just iconic. They look great, they drive great. They're still just about obtainable before they get really quite expensive. And they just come from an era of BMW where to drive, they're just a delight. Of course, the motto was always the ultimate driving machine, and it's almost true with one of these, to be honest. It's something that we've lost in modern cars, but for me, an E30 feels like it's just so light on its feet. It talks to you through the steering. As I say, it's not a out and out responsive sports car, but what it is, it just feels light, it feels dainty, you feel connected with the road. And one of the most fantastic things about it as well is it's the right size for our roads here. You can park it wherever, and park it next to a modern car. Bearing in mind this is a 3 Series, you just realise how big and bloated modern cars are now and how heavy. A brand new 3 Series now will be faster, more responsive, full of tech, safer, more reliable, more economical. But it doesn't give you that feel and that feedback, for me anyway, and it doesn't look as good as this. Step into the cabin of an E30 BMW, and it's such a step back in time here, but for me personally, I think it's a great era of BMW. It's possibly an era that they haven't ever beaten in terms of how the car looks, how the cars drive as well. The driving appeal, especially of an E30, is one of the best things about it. The great thing is as well, owning one of these cars, especially from, you know, the late 80s, early 90s, as this very car is owning one doesn't need to be a sacrifice. It's not like it hasn't got all the equipment in here and it doesn't drive like a modern car, because it does. In fact, I think in a lot of ways it drives better than a modern car, because you just feel so much more connected to the driving experience. But I'm not without luxury in here. I'm in perfectly comfortable leather sports seats that are really, really good, really supportive. There's leather absolutely everywhere. A really simple dashboard that everything is aimed towards the driver. Of course, BMWs of this era, they were all built around the motto of the ultimate driving machine. And as the minute you step into here and you hold this M Sport steering wheel and you look around, everything is driver focused, everything is clear. I can see the dials so well. It's a great place to be. It's going to feel cramped in comparison to a modern car. These aren't very big, but I think that's part of their appeal as well. You could have one of these in a city, you could live out in the middle of nowhere and enjoy it on a narrow country lane, and it's the right size car where you can have some fun with it and not worry about it. Also, it's not very heavy, so it feels light, it feels dainty. There's great feedback through the steering. The ride is actually very supple. It's a really, really nice car to drive, and honestly, this particular car is 33 years old and it drives better than some modern cars, and that's a testament to just how good and how well engineered the E30 was all those years ago. And it's certainly the reason why prices of these are going absolutely through the roof, because it is very much a very usable modern classic, one that looks great, drives great. What's not to like? Unfortunately, it is a really cold, blustery day here, so we're not going to have the roof off, which is a shame, because of course this car makes a great cruiser. It's got plenty of power from that 2.5 litre 6-cylinder up front. It's a great BMW unit. They used it for years. It's tried and tested. Silky smooth, plenty of power. Automatic gearbox on this one, available as a manual as well if you want to. It all really depends on your needs. If you just want something that's going to cruise along effortlessly and you can just enjoy the experience, go for the auto. If you want a bit more of an engaging drive, go for a manual. It's as simple as that, really. Now, of course, as I've mentioned a few times, values of these have really risen in the past few years. Even since I sold my own E30, that certain examples now have trebled in the last 5 years. This very car we're in now is a 325, as I mentioned. It is probably the one that's worth seeking out. That 6-cylinder is just so well suited to this car. It's still got plenty of power even today. You're not going to feel like you're left lacking. And this very car has just sold for £15,000, and that's about right. That's about the price for a really good example of a standard 325. Now, if you want to go for the very best out there, perhaps a 6-cylinder M Sport version, well, you can add another £10,000 onto that. They've really got quite expensive, and I would actually say those cars really are out of reach of most of us now. But luckily there is some hope. The E30 was available in many different forms. The saloon versions are still lagging behind in value, but there's not that many of them left. All E30s reached a point where they weren't worth a lot of money, but the cabrios and the tourings tended to be rarer, so people looked after them. The saloons were run of the mill, but values of those are still lagging behind. You could probably pay £10,000 to £12,000 for a really good 6-cylinder example, about £6,000 to £7,000 for a 4-cylinder version. The Tourings, well, they're a rare car now, and people really like those. 4 cylinders, £5,000 to £7,000 for an okay example, rising up to £15,000 for the very best 6 cylinders. So E30s are no longer cheap, and they don't seem to be showing any sign of stopping. So my advice is, if you've always wanted one, you've got a bit of money put aside, buy one now, because in a few years' time we could be looking at these thinking, we're never going to have one. They're just too expensive. And the great thing is there's a lot of support for the E30 out there. You can still buy plenty of the parts. Most things are available, and in actual fact, BMW still hold a lot of stock for E30 things, so you can still buy genuine parts for these, and they're not actually outrageously expensive. So you can look after one of these relatively cheaply. Most things are DIY friendly on them as well. So they're a great all-round package. But let me know in the comments below what you think and whether you would consider buying one of these, or if you had some memories with an E30. Perhaps you had one in your youth, perhaps your parents had one, your neighbours had one. Let me know below, because I feel like these were once a very, very common sight on our roads, and now they're not. They're few and far between. Good ones are rare. Prices are going up. So let's celebrate the E30 whilst we can still get hold of them for a good price. And if you're thinking about buying one, I thoroughly encourage you to do so, because they're a great ownership proposition, a great entry-level starter classic. You could use it every day if you need to.